Well, today on Blue Sky, a big picture question. We are asking, what are Saskatchewan values? The fall sitting of the legislature kicked off last week with the speech from the throne. This is the regularly scheduled get-together that we were expecting after the unplanned emergency gathering to talk about parents' rights and pronouns. The throne speech lays out the priorities of government and speaks to what the government thinks are the biggest issues facing the province. Today on Blue Sky, we've assembled a panel of folks from across the province to get their reaction to those priorities. We'll hear about what issues are most important in their lives, and as always, we want to hear from you. What do you make of the government's priorities and values? Are they in line with yours? What does the phrase Saskatchewan values mean to you? Now, if you missed the speech from the throne, we're going to get you caught up right now. On Friday, the CBC political reporter Adam Hunter and Murray Mandrick, who writes a political column in the Regina Leader-Post and Star Phoenix, joined Morning Edition host Stephanie Langenegger to go over the highlights.
Adam, what did the government tell us its priorities are in its throne speech?
Well, it didn't include the emergency session legislation, surprisingly, in the long throne speech. The premier saying that was kind of done and dusted. I'll paraphrase him. That was dealt with, and so there was no need to bring that up again. But there was a lot of stuff in the throne speech. The government announcing plans to have a plan for jobs, plan to attract investment, plan for mental health and addictions. Also, more specifically, they're going to use their Economic Impact Tribunal. This is a group of people that they have yet to appoint. That was in the Saskatchewan First Act from the last throne speech, to investigate the clean fuel standard, the clean electricity standard. These are the federal government's environmental policies to see if they're going to harm Saskatchewan's economy. There was a lot of Fed bashing in the throne speech, saying that there were, the biggest thing standing in Saskatchewan's way to growth is the federal government, which is something we've seen in past throne speeches as well. There's also raising the smoking age from 18 to 19. And this has been something that's been lobbied for years by the Lung Association, Cancer Society, most recently groups of students. So the government is raising the smoking and vaping age from 18 to 19. Those are some of the things that are in the throne speech.
What stood out to you?
Well, as Adam pointed out, that there was absolutely no mention of the critical issue, the emergency issue of pronouns. I'm guessing that's because probably if you look at sequence, the throne speech was put to bed long before this emergency session idea came along. So one thinks the emergency might be the emergency number in the Sask Party polling as it stands right now, because I think that's the biggest problem they had. To address that, to their credit, I think they did some good and smart and practical things by addressing housing costs. There's a lot on mental health. There's a lot on homelessness, drug addictions, where there seems to be some questionable policies as to whether they're in line with those groups that are actually trying to help people, like Prairie Harm and other words, because there's a different philosophical view of government. But I think herein lies the problem. They're walking this incredibly thin line in government right now between doing something smart and practical and not being seen as unreasonable, doing what the people want, like the PST on homes, which I think is popular but maybe doesn't address the problem, but at least it addresses a problem, to trying to address some of these other things that are of Saskatchewan values. We're threatened by everybody right now. We're threatened by that federal government that's doing bad things in relation to laws that affect our oil and gas industry. But at least that's tangible. Having exhausted the threat from the federal government, we now have to look for new and creative threats, like coming from our neighbors, who are the teachers that are obviously not telling us what's going on in schools, at least according to every grandma next door and everything else. Now we're being threatened by people, businesses, unknown entities that are keeping us from wearing poppies. Can you imagine keeping us from wearing poppies? My dad, who's a vet, would be rolling over in his grave, obviously, and would be very angry about this. But who in the hell is keeping us from wearing poppies? Well, the premier won't explain that to us. And I think that there's sort of this real push and pull, tug and with wanting to suggest that they're all about Saskatchewan values while still wanting to suggest they're a practical government that's dealing with real issues. And sometimes, well, you just got to run it up the flagpole and make sure there's one in front to every school to make sure your priorities are Saskatchewan as opposed to everything else, even though that doesn't make a lot of sense either. But it sure sounds good sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, flying the Saskatchewan flag is one thing. Paying to get it there is another. Do we know who's going to pay the cost of that? Because apparently it's not insignificant.
There's a lot of the Office meme where we're pointing at each other.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that going. The school divisions don't seem to know what the plan is. It seems like caught them by surprise. The government's sort of like, we have money, there's money. And when we asked Scott Moe the other day, the schools I've been to recently have more than one flagpole, so it's okay. And in fairness, he's been opening a few schools, and they do have more than one flagpole, but a lot of schools do not. And if you look at the cost of a flagpole, it can be anywhere fairly cheap to up to $5,000-$6,000. There's 600 plus public schools. If they all need a new flagpole, that adds up very quickly. They all need multiple flags. And Murray's colleague Larissa from the Leader posted a good story on this, where we also asked Minister Cockrell, and he wasn't exactly certain as to who was picking up the bill for these new flags. But it's very important that we have the Saskatchewan flag, according to the government, to be out there. Alberta does this as well. They pointed that out. There are people that are concerned that maybe we're not going to see a Pride flag or a Treaty 4 flag if we're in Regina.
Yeah, or the Métis flag,
or the
et cetera,
Métis flag, right? So there could be a lot of flags, hanging in the next year or so, but we don't know yet who's going to pay for it. As for the poppies, that's another thing that hasn't been explained. We don't know why this is becoming a law that make it illegal for you to say that for your employer to say to an employee, you can't wear a poppy at work. Premier Moe said there were a couple examples flagged to the government of government employees. We don't know if that's a Crown or agency government employee that weren't allowed to wear a poppy at work. So it's going to be a law probably within the next few days before Remembrance Day.
Murray, one thing I talked to a political scientist about an hour ago or so is that we haven't heard a lot from Scott Moe and Donna Harpower on Alberta's plan to take hundreds of billions of dollars out of our national pension plan and keep it for themselves.
Well, isn't that interesting? You think that would be the one thing that they would want to seize upon because obviously that fits into the motif of Saskatchewan first, Saskatchewan sovereignty, Saskatchewan whatever. Not so good an idea when it costs you bucks, though, and votes, which is the problem. It's a way bigger issue in Saskatchewan because we can't go it alone. We have to follow suit with Alberta on this, and I think a lot of people don't particularly like that. A lot of people in Alberta obviously don't particularly like that. I caught your interview, and there were some really interesting points about what happens with the portability of these pensions if you go from one province to the next.
Yeah, what if you go from La Loche and work in Fort Mac for 20 years?
For 20 years. Or back and forth, and as we all know in this province, there's a few people. We should raise a flag for fairness. That's what we should do. Old joke, folks.
Old political reporter jokes, folks. Google it. Raise a flag for fairness.
That went back to Laurie Calvert days.
That went over my head, you guys.
Yeah.
You're a young one.
Well, absolutely. They keep doing these things on a symbolic basis as opposed to a practical one, and I think that they're torn on this particular policy related to the CPP and withdrawing from it as to does this go a little bit too far for the liking of Saskatchewan people who obviously want to make a statement that we are proud Saskatchewan people. We run flags in front of our schools, take down those other flags that aren't as pretty. We'll use the one that seems to be pretty close to the one that's on our party logo, and we'll basically use that as sort of something to catch people's attention and everything else, but you got to be careful here not to go too far. And I think, honestly, withdrawing from the CPP is one of those things that might go a little too far and doesn't quite fit the political calculus of what maximizes votes for these guys, which seems to be how they're making many of these decisions related to pronouns, related to everything. Create somebody that's some threat to your values and throw out a throne speech about build and protect. Well, what are we being protected from and what are we building? That tends to be the really difficult questions that even the government seems to have a hard time answering right now.
And speaking of protecting people, we talked this week, and so did other media outlets, with women waiting months to see if the growing lumps in their breast are cancer or not. What's the opposition keying in on?
Yeah, that was brought up. It was a colleague, Laura, who had that story this week, and that was one of the first questions in question period. The the song from the opposition has been very similar. They're sticking to cost of living issues, your power bills, your grocery bills, issues like healthcare, like you mentioned, also emergency rooms. We found out that Betty Nippy Albright, one of the MLAs for Saskatoon Centre, fell on the ice outside of the legislature, and they took her 90 minutes to get an ambulance to the legislature. The staff had to drive her. She's okay. She didn't have any broken bones, but that was highlighted by Carla Beck as being, hey, this is a real life example that happened to one of our colleagues. Could happen to you. Is this acceptable? And we also had the NDP touting a news conference before question period yesterday, announcing Ron Stiles as this new senior advisor to Carla Beck and caucus, and he is a former SaskTel president of Sask Water, Sask Housing, deputy of finance back in the day. Said he's nonpartisan, but he's decided to shed that because he feels like the province is going in the wrong direction. So Carla Beck, as Murray said, the government's trying to get votes. That's what she's doing as well.
So back in the day, Adam says Ron Stiles is back in our day. What do you make of his new job?
Well, it's an incredible get for the opposition. Could knock me over with a feather because I knew Mr. Stiles in his professional capacity that Adam outlined, and I never really saw him to be anything other than a political type. He's just another bureaucrat I fought with over things like leaked budgets and stuff like that he probably didn't like. But, we had a good professional relationship because the man is a professional. I want to know what it means from here, because if it's a one-off where it's Ron Stiles basically making a decision as an individual, and he quite passionately raised interesting concerns about this government being out of touch and not really expressing those values that he thinks are Saskatchewan values, which is a critical issue as per my previous comments about the Saskatchewan Party trying to pump into these values.
Poppies and flags.
Poppies and flags that seem to be sometimes coming more from the likes of American Republicans than it does from Saskatchewan people. And Mr. Stiles basically said yesterday that no, enough is enough. We're not going to basically get into this stuff, or we're getting too much into this stuff that's driven by politics, and we're missing really critical aspects that are needed to make Saskatchewan grow. That could be a popular notion among a lot of people in the hierarchy, former hierarchy in this province, that might be at least thinking along the same line as Mr. Stiles, and it might open floodgates. But that's just a big might. I guess we'll see. One of the problems that this government has, it's so anti-intellectual, so anti-professional in so many ways. Having a Ron Stiles who was a professional civil servant for them, not just the NDP government, but for them, basically say this government is not acting in a professional way, buttresses a lot of things the opposition has been saying about the buffoonish behavior that we're sort of seeing from individual ministers, from ideas coming before government, and just the way they're acting. And as per our previous comments, once you get that reputation that you're more about buffoonery than you are about governance, it's a real big problem for you.
That was the CBC's Adam Hunter and political columnist Murray Mandrake speaking with the Morning Edition's Stephanie Langenegger. So what are your thoughts? What are the Saskatchewan values that are most important to you? And when I use the phrase Saskatchewan values, what do you think that means? Now, we've put together a panel of 3 people from across Saskatchewan to weigh in on their political priorities. On the phone, we have Gerald Albers. He is the mayor of Lloydminster and vice president of cities with SUMA, currently on his way to Edmonton to watch the speech from the throne in that province, since, of course, his city is on the border. In our Regina studio is Tayyaf Ahmed and Lynn Robertson. Tayyaf is an international student from Bangladesh who's studying human justice and political science. He's also the executive director of the Regina Public Interest Research Group at the University of Regina. And Lynn Robertson is one of the pastors at Christ Lutheran Church in Regina. And welcome to you all. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
First, you all just heard Murray and Adam's take on the speech from the throne. I'm curious what you think. What stood out for you from the speech from the throne, and where would you say the priorities of government are? I'll start with you, Tayyaf.
I personally felt like the speech in the government plan was a little bit destructive. I don't think government is reflecting what's been going on in the province, what's the needs for the province. We've been talking about values of Saskatchewan, and then one of the greatest values of Saskatchewan should be the values that includes everybody in this province. And I don't think that the issues the government is putting forward and dealing with right now doesn't concern a lot of people, and they're uncalled for. One of the main values that we can talk about is safety of all citizens, and then we're having problem with the physical, psychological, societal, and environmental safety issues all over Saskatchewan, and we're not really putting any effort into that, and that's kind of disappointing from the government. But there's an election coming up in next year, so government probably has their different take on different things, but I'm personally disappointed.
Gerald, from your point of view, what stood out for you from the speech from the throne here in Saskatchewan, and what do you take from that about Saskatchewan's government priorities right now?
Well, some of the things that resonated with me was the dealing with the homelessness, mental health, and addictions in the throne speech. And that's been a cornerstone advocacy issue for both SUMA and many different mayors and cities, towns, and villages in northern Saskatchewan. So I think that was great to see. I think that we appreciated that being recognized, because we've been fairly vocal about that. Maybe they didn't go quite far enough on CIS and SED, the programs to assist those through social services, but certainly it was a good step forward on an issue that's been very front and center for many communities.
Well, Gerald, where can you be more specific? Like, what do you see in the speech that might help with the homelessness problem in your community?
Well, I think that there's some resources being made available to communities, not just cities, but the different communities in Saskatchewan to work with organizations. And I know I'm aware in our community that money has been, there's a grant underway, I believe, and being worked on towards ensuring that we have a warming center this winter for those that are homeless. We have a men's shelter, we have an integral home for women and children, but there is a gap, and that has been identified that there will be funding available this year, I understand, through the budget, through the organizations in our community, as well as, there's resources continuously being made available in other communities for mental health and addiction, certainly in the youth as well as adults. And those are all steps that we believe are positive steps forward. We've been asking for it, and there's always more to be done, but if you don't get started, this is moving in the right direction.
Gerald, you and I have talked about the homelessness issue before, province-wide and specifically in Lloydminster. Were you disappointed that there were no changes to the Saskatchewan Assistance Program?
I was disappointed, and I know there'll be ongoing discussions with the minister going forward again in the near future, because this is an issue that is challenged in the province. We all know about the rising costs of groceries, utilities. It was alluded to earlier over the noon hour. It's a challenge, and it's not just in our province, I'm afraid. It's in every province and territory in Canada. Each province has a responsibility, as does the federal government, I guess I would say at this point, to assist where they can.
Then I'll put the same question to you. What are the priorities you see in your immediate circle and through your day-to-day work?
Well, certainly when I think of Saskatchewan values, I think about people working hard, pulling together, helping their neighbor, and certainly the circles that I run with within the church and other organizations, we feel very strongly about generosity, so being generous with our financial gifts and our time and our skills to make the world and our communities a better place. I know a lot of folks are very concerned about access to education and healthcare. And again, the values that I see reflected in the church I serve and other religious communities. Equality is very important, diversity is very important, and inclusion is very important. And so those are some of the Saskatchewan values that I hold myself and see the people around me holding as well.
Did you see anything in the throne speech that reflects those values?
Well, there were a few things, like was mentioned before, houselessness and the commitment to regarding addictions. However, given the past record of the current government, I'm hoping to see some tangible delivery on what we heard in the throne speech.
Okay, and Tayef, the same question to you before the news break. What are the priorities you see in your immediate circle when it comes to Saskatchewan values?
I think around myself, I think equal opportunity is very important. I study at the University of Regina, and then a lot of students at the University of Regina feel like they're not being put as a priority in the government eyes. We've been in post-secondary funding. We've been decreased over the years. Our university executives are all over the world right now to gain some international student enrollment, so that they can fund their education. While our quality of education has been in question for some time right now. So, are we putting our university executive to more seeking enrollment than increasing the quality of education at universities? That's been a question that we have for the government for some time right now. At the same time, there are some programs. The people need more investments. For example, Saskatchewan Income Assistance SED program. Income SED is meant to be, for example, an income replacement program, and we haven't had a significant increase over the last 7 years. We only had a $1 a day increase last year, and then with the climbing inflation rate and then cost of everything that is going on right now, the people are suffering. We need to invest on those what people need, and like I said before, our values should include all the people, and I feel like what we're having right now are not including every individuals in this province.
Okay, folks, back to the conversation today. The big picture question again is, what are Saskatchewan values? The throne speech was pretty heavy on sort of symbolism, not a lot of meat, but a lot of symbolism. And do those values reflected in the throne speech things like making it illegal to stop someone from wearing a poppy, or the requirement to have the Saskatchewan flag flown in front of every school? Before the throne speech, of course, was the emergency session to pass the Parents' Bill of Rights, or sort of shorthand, it's become known as the Pronoun Bill. Give us a call today with your thoughts. Again, were what you consider Saskatchewan values reflected in the throne speech or the pronoun legislation? What comes to mind when I say the phrase Saskatchewan values? What comes to mind? Let's go to the phone lines. Let's start with Jack in Lumsden. Hi, Jack.
Hello. Thanks for this program. I think this is key. Saskatchewan values, I think that we've always built in Saskatchewan on cooperation, help yourself but help your neighbor kind of thing, communication, open communication, and getting consensus on moving forward with plans and programs. I don't know about you or anybody else that's listening, but I don't wake up every morning worried about a flagpole with a provincial flag in front of all the schools. I didn't have any anxiety around wearing my poppy, and I think this government is so far removed from provincial needs, it's bordering on bizarre. We have education problems. We're looking at a withdrawal of services. We have healthcare crisis. We have senior housing crisis. Nobody seems to be talking about the baby boomer retirement demographics, and the senior care issues are going to increase. And I just don't understand what's going on in this government at all. And I think if you're in a government and you get elected, you have to realize you're representing and serving the population, not your base.
Right. Jack, thanks for your thoughts today.
Right.
Let's move on to Ed in Regina. Hi, Ed.
For Saskatchewan values, my top value is health care. Saskatchewan in the past was the leader in the country on the issue of health care, and we've really fallen very far. The next highest value for me is education, having a good education, and in both health and education, I believe we are in serious crisis. We don't have enough teachers in the classrooms for the students, and there's not enough assistance for the students as well who have special needs. For healthcare, I'm personally on a long waiting list to even get a biopsy to find out if I have cancer or not. And I know quite a few of my friends are in similar positions. So for us, the health system is in crisis, and our needs are not being met. The other area I think that is Saskatchewan value is looking after our seniors who built up this province. And I'm disgusted when I hear that the Lutheran home was closed and Saskatchewan Health Authority is not doing anything about those beds, 62 beds that are going to be taken away.
Yeah.
And here we have more and more seniors needing beds, and yet we're having to cut back on them.
Okay.
So I don't think the government is. Well, okay, I'll let you.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there, Ed. We're getting over time. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for the call. Thanks for your thoughts. I'd like to get your thoughts on what we've heard from callers so far. I'll start with you, Lynn.
Just listening to Ed and the closure of the Regina Lutheran Home, that hits close to me, being a Lutheran pastor and having members of our congregation there. And I understand that a lot of these closures of senior facilities have to do with the lack of provincial funding. So it's unfortunate that the resources are there, but they're not being financially supported. And certainly healthcare is a huge issue. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor myself, and I am appreciative that at those times I had quick access to biopsies and surgery, and it was very disheartening to read about the many months that women now have to wait for biopsies. And then, of course, access to education is very important. If we have an educated population, I just think that the more people in our province are educated, the more people are aware of the issues and how to help make our province a better place if they're aware of the issues and how to better help our neighbor.
Gerald, what do you think of what we've heard from callers so far?
Certainly, healthcare is prevalent in many communities across Saskatchewan, and that concern about the quality of healthcare. And again, I believe that there was a brief mention in the throne speech about the nurse loan forgiveness program that the government is expanding, and the human health resources action plan, which is very important because there is no question there's facilities throughout Saskatchewan that need that staffing. Funding is always a critical piece to it, and I'm looking to the government to see as the budget comes forward, because I think the throne speech lays out the intentions. We really see where the money goes at the budget speech, that's which we'll expect in, I suspect, March, and that will give us some direction as to where the government's going. And
TAF?
People have their basic necessities, like food come to the first. A lot of Saskatchewan people right now are dealing with food insecurity. And when we talk about the food insecurity, it's not only about the scarcity of the food, it's also quality of the food as well. A lot of people, with the ramp up of all the prices and everything, are choosing frozen food and then pre-cooked meals, then the fresh vegetable and fruits. And that leads to us for, chronic disease, and that's put us in a burden in the healthcare system in years to come. And then given that we're not focusing on our food, our education, our health, as well as our basic necessities in life, we're not treating every individual with respect, and then we're not considering their safety as well. And that's been concerning, and we ought to be working on that regard.
Okay, Gerald, now you're on your way to Alberta right now for the throne speech in that province. How would you compare the priorities of the Saskatchewan government and what the Alberta government has been signaling?
Well, there's certainly, I think that because of the oil and gas industry, the Alberta government has certainly been sending a lot more messages to Ottawa and to Canada about the issues that are and I think they'll be prevalent. But I can say, being a border city, healthcare, education, those are what we've just been talking about, the increased costs of food, shelter, education, people's resources to pay are front in mind. And I think that will be, I expect that will be addressed somehow in the throne speech, but I believe there'll be some discussions about ensuring that Alberta protects their interests from that perspective, maybe more than it was said in Saskatchewan at this time, just due to the recent challenges around various things, the changes in Ottawa, to the court challenges and things like that. But I suspect there'll be some overlap, but there'll also be some difference.
Okay, I want to read a few emails we got here, a couple anyway. This one comes from Kevin, who writes, I honestly don't know what people mean when they throw around the word values. The reality for most people on this planet is all they want is to get up, do something to make a living that doesn't make us want to fall off a cliff so we can try to enjoy the other parts of our lives. What really boggles my mind is the folks who spend their spare time worrying so much about other people's personal lives. It seems that because of that loud minority of people who apparently have no real hobbies, the government is more concerned these days with the appearance of doing something useful rather than actually doing something useful. The Saskatchewan Party is so thoroughly out of good ideas, or at least unwilling to listen to what the majority of voters want. All they can do now is put a bunch of political theater on display for us about pronouns and poppies, hoping we're too stupid to notice. Time for the Sask Party to go. That came to us from Kevin. And this email came earlier today from Kelly, and it's a little long, but it's well thought out, so I want to share it. Kelly writes, in my estimation, Saskatchewan values is a myth, the same way that Canadian values is a myth, the same way that saying any country or province has shared values is to promote a myth. Large numbers of people like that of a province can't be guaranteed to share values beyond those that all humans share: fresh air, clean water, shelter, safety, and freedom. It is the reason for which we have to create laws and charters, because we disagree too much. Thus, to promote the term Saskatchewan values is to fabricate a story. It's a tactic of sentimentalism based on the fear of being left out, but which unfortunately makes existing divisions more prominent, the opposite of what is supposedly wanted. It's a dangerous political ploy that, instead of bringing us all together, creates instead an us versus them mentality, which is, at its worst, something we call nationalism. That came to us from Kelly. Let's talk about that for a little bit. I'll start with you, Gerald. I never actually put this question to the three of you, so I will now. Quite simply, our big view question today is, what are Saskatchewan values? And Gerald, now I know that you live with one foot in both provinces, but when I say Saskatchewan values to you, what comes to mind?
Well, I think, Saskatchewan was built on hard work as well as cooperation, and that was noted earlier. Be it as farmers, when a lot of people started and immigrated to Saskatchewan from where they came from and all around the world, they worked themselves, but they also worked together for barn raisings and community building, community hall building, and things like that. And along came healthcare. Healthcare is synonymous with Saskatchewan people after Tommy Douglas brought it forward as universal healthcare. And I think that, the quality of life, I think that speaks to me about Saskatchewan. Fresh air, the blue sky, clear skies, and the Rough Riders. And I guess and I'll leave it at that.
All right. Okay, Lynn, the big picture question for you then. When I say Saskatchewan values, what do you think of?
I was born in this province, lived my first 3 years of my life in this province, returned in 1997. And when I got my new healthcare card, Saskatchewan healthcare card, someone looked at my birth certificate and said, "Welcome home." And I just thought, yeah, I am home and I feel at home here. We all have personal values, and myself, I also have values that I call my faith values. And being born in this province and now living in this province again since 1997, I do see, like, the average person in this province, not everybody, of course, sharing the values that I share, as that I will call faith values. I mean, you can hold these values whether you're a person of faith or not, and I've seen lots of folks hold the same values as I that wouldn't describe themselves as people of faith. again, the values, we've said already, working hard, pulling together, helping the neighbor, and maybe not specifically Saskatchewan values, but maybe just the values of decent human beings. But I think there is something special in Saskatchewan that I have felt, and I have lived in another province and another territory. And there is a coming together here that I have personally experienced and seen in many different ways, and also that commitment to inclusion and diversity. So, are Saskatchewan values a myth? I would challenge that, because we all hold personal values, and I think as people of Saskatchewan, we do hold a lot of the same values, even though, of course, not everybody in Saskatchewan is going to hold all the same values, because we are a diverse province, and diversity is one of our values as well.
Tev, now you bring an interesting point of view as a newcomer. When I say Saskatchewan values, based on your experience, what comes to mind?
It's very hard to kind of assess what our values are, but we can definitely tell what our values should be. And then one of the values that I think as a young person living in my 20s and newcomer to this province, equal opportunity. And then we're in this province, we're not getting the equal opportunity to our education, to our health, and to many different things across our lives. And, some of our values should be compassion for each other, accountability for the government, to listen to everyone's perspective and take them into account when they make a decision. It's not to be divisive and then create a polarized kind of political opinion. Also, we should have a value of respect to one another. And then, we can't agree to a set of values every time in this province. However, we can have a mutual values that thrive our province. We're not a very big province in this country, but if we distinguish ourselves with the values that attracts the rest of Canada, the rest of the world, that's where we'll be known for. When we started our healthcare from this province, we were known for our healthcare. But look at right now, our healthcare is in crisis, and we're not being known for healthcare. I mean, we could do something very distinguished that separate us from other part of the world, and then people can say, "Well, you're from Saskatchewan," or "This is from Saskatchewan." But I think we're going far from that, and we need to be in the position that we ought to be.
Okay, let's hear from some callers as we quickly run out of time. We'll start with James in Saskatoon, and just callers, I'm going to limit you all to 2 minutes because there's quite a few of you and we're almost out of time. So that said, James, here's your 2 minutes. Go.
Hi, Garth. Yeah, I was born in the first half of the last century, so I've lived in Saskatchewan most of my life. And when I was young in the early 50s, there was a sense of community support. We had the wheat pool. We had a social democratic government. We had organizations like the Legion and the Shrine, the various service clubs, who were all influential. We had community newspapers. We had provincial newspapers. And everybody got together and worked for the benefit of the province. Now what I see is the decline of what they call legacy media, and it's taken over by social media. And now all you have is a government who listens to a bunch of fringe conspiracy theorists who are influencers on social media. And so our values have changed from supporting community and making community grow to having supporting small individuals with their their glorified impressions of themselves. So I guess that's what we have now, is we just have a premier who has a glorified impression of himself and a government that has that, and all that they do is follow conspiracy theories.
All right.
And that's my impression.
All right, James, thanks for sharing that.
Bye.
Okay, we're going to move on to Kathy in Regina. Kathy, hello.
Hello, Garth. Such good comments today and broad-ranging. I want to change the conversation slightly to the ads that I see dotted across the province with Scott Moe being quoted as saying, Saskatchewan, a place that works for everyone. And in so many ways, that just seems so offensive to what is actually happening. And if we want to have serious conversations about what's happening across our province and our relationship within Canada as a federal organization, then we need to be talking about things like federal support for our transportation systems, airports, highways, the building and construction funding projects that we have supported by the federal government. Let's add emergency services to that component and fire safety and all other kinds of things. I really wish they would broaden their minds. They've got the capacity to. If they would only use it, and if they'd only start listening, then we could have a good conversation. But until then, all we get is this pap. And I don't mind about poppies. But that's so insignificant in the big picture. I hope the Sask Party are listening because they're in big trouble if they don't start listening fast.
All right, Kathy, thanks. I'm going to move on to Chris in Regina. Hi, Chris. Hello, Chris.
Good afternoon, Garth. Yes. So I wanted to weigh in with this notion of Saskatchewan values. I guess I have to agree slightly with the one person who emailed, Kelly, I think it was, with their comment about values. But I think in the past in this province we saw practicality and pragmatism. I think those were Saskatchewan values, where people looked at real serious issues that had an impact on the greater populace and people's well-being, and they worked to address those. And we had a rich history of collectivism and cooperative movements, things like the wheat pool and that kind of thing, and other callers have alluded to that. And that's what I think of when I think of traditional Saskatchewan values. Unfortunately, with this government, they've been in power a long time. They've grown lazy and complacent, and I think they now think that they rule almost by divine right. And so, instead of dealing with critical issues that many callers have put their finger on, they manufacture, pronoun and poppy panics, and they're quite content to just blame Ottawa for all of the ills that we're experiencing and do nothing, from a provincial standpoint. I mean, they could take the PST off of a bunch of things that they added it to a number of years ago, but there's been no talk of that. So, it's a discouraging situation, and I don't know what it's going to take to change.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to stop you there and move on quickly to Stefan in Saskatoon. Hi, Stefan.
Hi. I concur with a lot of the people who have issues with the term values in general, the divisive aspect of that. What I'd like to draw attention to is the word Gleichschaltung, which was a Nazi German term, which was used to unify and to create the conditions for their totalitarian control. And it covered all aspects of German society. And specifically, it dealt with elements of the economy and trade associations, media, culture, and education. And what I'm finding dangerously in the rhetoric that we see from this government is that they have zero tolerance for views that are outside of what they've come up with. They have zero tolerance for approaches and for the consultation with others in regards to any industry consultations or community consultations. And yeah, I think as far as values go, we all have human values. We all have the same desires and the same hopes and dreams for us and our families. What I find really alarming is that since I moved to this province in the late 90s, in 97, is that what that term means isn't what I associate my personal values to associate with anymore. Maybe on the surface, maybe the basics, but specifically in regards to education, healthcare, seniors, all the issues that have been mentioned, I see zero movement. I've seen zero movement since, I don't know, it's been years now. And I don't think we're going to see any movement because I think they're happier with development and trying to extract resources and fill their pockets. That's what I think.
Okay. All right, Stefan, thanks so much for the call. Take one more call, and then I want to wrap things up with the guests. Maria and Swift Current, like everybody, you get 2 minutes.
I have far more empathy for this government than the rest of the callers. And part of it's because, like, even in my own life, I really struggle with my personal values, yet the reality of this world we live in. And I think an important point in history that I think can really explain this on a behavioral psychology level. I'll just say story of Jesus when he fought against corruption and tried to point out this to people. And then when it came to the time they were going to kill him, there was given a choice to the people of who they wanted to release. And it seemed like people's hearts were with Jesus, but they were afraid of the empire. So they screamed Barabbas. And I think that's now we have values, but we're so afraid of this system and making any change that we just go along with it anyways. And, it seems like, do you even have values if you're not living it? And we're going along with this system that's clearly failing. And so I have empathy for the government because I think it would be really hard because I think there's a lot more at play than just the superficial stuff that we complain about.
Right. Thanks, Maria. Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left for our guests, but what we've seen from the provincial government so far in this session and the emergency session was to pass a law to fly the Saskatchewan flag at every school, an act to enshrine a person's right to wear a poppy, and then, of course, the parental rights law. In 30 seconds or so, Lynn, what message does this together send to you?
Can you repeat the question, Garth? What is the...
Well, when you look at what the government has promised in the throne speech about the flag flying at the schools and the right to wear a poppy, and before that, of course, the emergency debate on parental rights, what do you think the overall message is?
Well, what I hear is a government that is not in touch with the people of Saskatchewan and the values that we hold.
And Gerald, what message do you get from the provincial government right now?
Well, I guess that from the perspective of the flag, I think it shows some pride in our province. It's the symbol of our province. Poppies, I have my own personal opinion as being a first-generation Canadian, very proud of the Canadian soldiers. And, I'm not sure if it was overreach, but I'm certainly proud to wear a poppy.
Okay. And finally, Tayeff, put together, what is the message?
I think putting a flag as well as having poppy are really, really good things. But given the time we're in and then government sending those messages, I feel like they are trying to armstrong their political stand to a more conservatism. And I think if that's the province they want to see, they want to win in the next election. They want to rethink their strategies toward the election.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Much.